Chapter 788, Blood Poison of Pluto. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. At this moment, Zhang Yuochen was at the edge of the square. He stared in the direction that fourth disciple Feng Han had left in. Confused, he thought, that's strange. Why did fourth senior brother apprentice take master's body away alone? Why didn't first, second, and third senior brother apprentice go with him? Earlier, Saint King Xiao had set up his Saint Soul territory around Sword Saint Xuanji's body, blocking all sound. Thus, Zhang Yuochen couldn't hear what they'd said and didn't know what had happened. At that moment, Zhang Yuochen felt something. He turned around and saw Huang Yanchen, who was walking over. Their eyes met. Huang Yanchen's eyes were slightly red and swollen. There were still tears on her cheeks. Evidently, her teacher's death had affected her greatly. Then Zhang Yuochen glanced at Mujiji and Xunhua Liu. What are you two still here for? Can't you see that I want to talk to Princess Yanchen alone? Mujiji and Xunhua Liu were both experts at love. They immediately showed that they understood and cleverly walked away. Straight away, Huang Yanchen used telepathy to tell Zhang Yuochen about Feng Han. However, Zhang Yuochen extended a hand and gestured for her to stop. He looked outside the sword pavilion. As expected, many pairs of eyes kept glancing at him and Huang Yanchen. This included the Saint Lady's eyes. Zhang Yuochen and Huang Yanchen weren't saints and couldn't use Saint Soul territories. Even if they used telepathy, people with higher cultivation realms could still hear their conversation. Even though Huang Yanchen felt it was urgent, she didn't dare speak now either. She didn't want to expose Zhang Yuochen's identity. The two kept silent and left the ancient god's mountain. Zhang Yuochen didn't release his body protecting Holy Kang until they reached Xixia Sacred Mountain. After enveloping both he and Huang Yanchen, he spoke first. Don't be too sad, he comforted. Master is a swordsman. It was a brilliant end to die in a final duel witnessed by thousands. Even in death, there are no regrets. Huang Yanchen leaned in Zhang Yuochen's arms, biting her lips. Tears spilled from her eyes again. She nodded and suddenly thought of her question from before, so she asked, Zhang Yuochen, Master had the highest helps for you. Did he tell you who he wanted to be his heir? Zhang Yuochen nodded. He'd talked to me about this before. He said that his biggest regret is that he couldn't find the one who could inherit his position. Huang Yanchen's features twitched. Is fourth senior brother apprentice not able to either? I'd asked him before, but he just shook his head. In the end, he wanted me to be his heir instead. He told me that if he died in a final battle, I should take the Tertian sword and his body to the Pluto sword tomb in the central region. Zhang Yuochen felt bitter. Clearly, he didn't want to talk about the heir so soon after his teacher passed away. But Huang Yanchen was shocked at Zhang Yuochen's words. He and fourth senior brother's words were so similar. Without a doubt, one of them was lying. Huang Yanchen obviously believed in Zhang Yuochen, so she told him everything that Feng Han had said without missing a single word. How can this be? Zhang Yuochen's expression changed. Master can't choose two heirs at once, Huang Yanchen said. Zhang Yuochen, why do I feel like something's wrong with fourth senior brother? There must be something wrong. Zhang Yuochen's expression hardened. Tell me, did Master meet with fourth senior brother privately before the sword technique conference? Huang Yanchen nodded. Zhang Yuochen inhaled sharply. His eyes narrowed and his hands clenched involuntarily. Master clearly had the upper hand in the fight against the 9 Serenity Sword Saint. How could he suddenly die? I have a feeling that fourth senior brother must have something to do with Master's death. How is that possible? Huang Yanchen asked. Why would he harm Master? Don't ask so many questions. I'll pursue him now. I can't let him take away Master's body and the Tertian sword, Zhang Yuochen said coldly. Huang Yanchen knew how high Feng Han's cultivation was, so she was worried for Zhang Yuochen's safety. I'll go with you. Zhang Yuochen shook his head. No. Go find first senior brother in the sword pavilion and tell him this privately. If necessary, you can tell him that I'm still alive. Remember, you can only tell first senior brother. Do not reveal it to anyone else. It wasn't that Zhang Yuochen didn't trust the others, but amongst them, first senior brother apprentice was the most reliable. He wouldn't leak the secret. It was best if the others didn't know the truth. Box Novel Feng Han had just left. He'd hidden his qi and hadn't left behind any traces. But Zhang Yuochen could still detect a remnant of his qi in the air by releasing his spiritual power. Zhang Yuochen immediately put on the shooting star invisible cloak and activated his techniques to the extreme. He disappeared from the spot and started chasing at top speed under the night sky. If his teacher really had been killed by someone's trap, Zhang Yuochen would kill him with his bare hands, no matter who it was. Huang Yanxian was also extremely anxious. She immediately hurried back to the ancient god's mountain. Because of the shooting star invisible cloak, Zhang Yuochen was impossibly fast. Average monks couldn't see him clearly at all. He soon left the yin and yang sect and entered the vast fallen god's mountain range. Feng Han's remnant of qi in the air grew more obvious. Clearly, Zhang Yuochen wasn't far away from him now. How does Feng Han know about the Tertian sword's secret? This question remained in Zhang Yuochen's mind. Sword Saint Xuanji definitely wouldn't tell him, so there must be a third party. Thinking of this, Zhang Yuochen became more careful. He slowed down and activated the shooting star invisible cloak's invisibility feature. He hid his qi inside the cloak. After a while, Feng Han came into his vision. Zhang Yuochen immediately stopped. He landed on the ground and stood a few hundred feet away, quietly observing Feng Han. He really wanted to know what Feng Han was planning. Feng Han looked very cautious. He looked around in all directions. Seeing that no one had followed over, he placed Sword Saint Xuanji's body on the ground. Then he took out a black ocarina. Placing it by his lips, he made a strange noise. Whoosh, whoosh. A moment later, 5 huge black bats flew out of the forest. They landed before him and transformed into human shape. No, more accurately, these weren't bats. They were 5 humans with wings. They were just covered in black robes, so when they flew, they looked like huge bats. Immortal vampires. Zhang Yuochen's eyes darkened. Now, he was sure that his teacher's death must have had something to do with Feng Han. Slowly, Zhang Yuochen took out the Abyss Ancient Sword and grasped it tightly. Greetings, 6th Prince. The 5 half-cent vampires all bowed to Feng Han in unison. The vampire at the front was a red-haired elder named Half-Cent Xi. He was more than 8 feet tall and was very muscular. He was also much more powerful than the other 4 half-saints. Clearly, he had a high status. Half-Saint Xi chuckled. The results are indeed extraordinary when the 6th Prince acts personally. Sword Saint Xuanji is indeed powerful, but he still had no option but to die. Everyone has their weaknesses, Feng Han said. Sword Saint Xuanji is no exception. That old man's biggest weakness was that he trusted his disciples too much. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance to make him drink blood poison of Pluto. Half-Saint Xi sneered. The blood poison of Pluto is a toxic poison created by Lord Pluto with his own blood. It's tasteless and colorless. It's no different from water. I doubt even that Empress could detect it, let alone Sword Saint Xuanji. Feng Han glanced at Half-Saint Xi. He pulled out the Tertian sword and tossed it to him. Take the Tertian sword back and personally hand it to my father. This is now the 2nd Saint sword we've received. If we can take the other 4, we can go to the Pluto sword tomb, kill the guards, and open the gate of bloody hell. At that time, Lord Pluto will be able to return. As long as Lord Pluto returns to Kunlun's field, even that Empress Kaya will have to die. The entire Kunlun's field will be ruled by us, the immortal vampires. Those lowly humans will be nothing more than prey. Half-Saint Xi held the Tertian sword. Hearing Feng Han's words, he also grew excited. 6th Prince, you've accomplished something so great and showed down the other princes. I'm sure His Majesty will reward you heavily. Expression serious, Feng Han said, there's something else. When you return, tell father to send people to investigate the book Vampire Secrets. This book may pose a huge threat to our race. Understood. Half-Saint Xi nodded, but then said, will you not return together to see His Majesty? Feng Han shook his head. Looking at Sword Saint Xuanji's body, his expression turned ambiguous. I need to cultivate in isolation and won't return for now. Sword Saint Xuanji's blood is very precious. If I drink all his blood and refine it, my cultivation should raise at least 3 levels. A cold voice filled with hatred rang out from the darkness. I'm afraid you won't be able to enjoy that. Feng Han's face darkened. He activated his Saint Soul territory instantly, going on guard. At the same time, his eyes turned blood red. This was his blood sky eye. He looked around and asked coldly, "Who are you?" Whoosh! Wind started blowing. Feng Han discovered with shock that someone had run into his Saint Soul territory and appeared behind him. Thus, Feng Han formed a handprint and slammed his palm back. He'd acted so quickly, but he'd still missed. Boom! The strong wind from his palm flattened the forest nearby. The thick and ancient trees all cracked in half. Leaves and splinters flew everywhere. Even a thick layer of dirt was scraped clean. Feng Han felt something was amiss. He immediately looked down and discovered that Sword Saint Xuanji's body had vanished. Wind started blowing again. A ghostly apparition appeared 300 feet away. All the shadows overlapped, forming a young man. He held Sword Saint Xuanji's body in his arms. Cold murderous intent radiated from him.